Hello my friends and welcome to the third video in my series about the complete rule set of Space Empires and all its expansions. Space Empires, we're talking about the monumental 4X game, Exploration, Exploitation, Expansion, Extermination, a game by Jim Crone, published by GMT Games. Fine, so at this point, you're in charge of a home planet in your corner of the universe, but you're not alone because 3 other players of 3 other colors are trying to develop their own civilization in the other 3 corners of that same universe. In my previous videos, I explained how to explore your system and how to use its resources to build new equipments. Explore, exploit, that's 2 X's. Unfortunately, we don't live in a carefree world, and it's very likely that red player, for example, has built up a small fleet of 3 scout ships that are dying to cross the universe to attack your yellow fleet of 2 scout ships. Well, the truth is, as you know, that it's a lot more complicated than that, because at the beginning of the game, the universe is full of unexplored hexagons. Yes, your game board is really going to look like that. And a fleet that wants to get to the other end has to dig its way by exploring hexagons one by one, because exploration is mandatory. You cannot fly through unexplored hexagons. But for this example, I've decided to ignore that, and I assume that the universe is empty and that this little red fleet has made its way to the yellow fleet. And here we are. When 2 opposing fleets meet in the same hexagon, there's a fight. Combat is mandatory. The 2 players cannot agree not to fight. As soon as units of different colors are in the same hexagon, they must fight. And the battle continues until only 1 color remains in the hexagon. In the sequence of play, combat takes place here, just after movement, so just after red unit, in our example, has entered yellow unit's hexagon. When a battle occurs, first you put a battle token to remember in which hexagon the battle is taking place. Then you slide the units next to the game board. Each unit has an attack value and a defense value. For a scout ship, this is 3 for attack and 0 for defense. And then, battle resolution is very simple. Each ship rolls 1 die. In this game we use 10-sided dice. And the attack is successful if the result is less than or equal to the fire's attack minus the target's defense. Note that the 0 on the die corresponds to a result of 10. And if I may, I'd like to take advantage of this video to send a message to the production managers at GMT Games, if they can hear me. When are you going to put dice in your game boxes with an actual 10 written on them instead of a 0? End of my message. Now, in Space Empires, no combat is ever simultaneous, and by default, it's always the defender who shoots first. So here, as it is red player's turn, who has just moved to enter this hexagon, the defender is yellow player. He has 2 ships and rolls the die twice. Each successful die inflicts 1 point of damage. In our example, yellow player therefore inflicts 1 point of damage on his opponent. The amount of damage a ship can incur is equal to its hull size. The size of a scout ship is 1, and this is shown on its counter by this times 1. So 1 damage is enough to eliminate 1 scout ship. Red player loses 1 ship. Now it's up to red player, the attacker, to retaliate. And he only rolls 2 dice because he's had 1 ship eliminated before he's even had a chance to fire. This is the defender's advantage. Red player also eliminates 1 ship. And since every player still has good order ships, the fight goes on. Yellow player rolls one die, he misses, so red player attacks with his two ships. Yellow player is eliminated and red player keeps two ships, which he puts back on the board. That's how you conquer a little piece of the vast universe. Now you know the basics of combat, and that's how you're going to exterminate your opponents, according to the Holy Gospel of the 4X game. Now let me introduce a new unit, the Cruiser, abbreviation CA. The Cruiser is a very interesting unit, and thanks to it, we're going to learn a whole host of new rules. For now, we don't know yet how to buy and to build such a unit, but let's say that red player actually did build one, and now he's attacking our two yellow scouts. He also has two red scouts to back up his cruiser. And what is interesting about this fight is that the units have different letters. Do you see this letter? C for cruiser, E for scout. This is the class of the fighting unit. It shows to what degree this ship is made for combat. A C cruiser is better equipped for combat than an E scout. In practical terms, this affects the order in which units resolve the battle, from the lower letter to the higher. With the letter C, the red cruiser shoots first. Attack 4 minus the yellow scout's defense of 0, he must roll a 4. 2, it's a success, he eliminates a scout. Let's move on to the next letter, E. For this letter, there is a tie between the scouts on both sides. And in the event of a tie, we go back to the basic rule, priority goes to the defender. So the yellow scout is going to shoot, but at whom? He has two possible targets, the cruiser or the scouts. So now he has to choose before he shoots, before he throws the die. Note that if yellow player still had his two scouts, each one could shoot at a different target. And how to choose? If he shoots the cruiser, attack 3 minus defense 1, he must roll a 2 or less. And against the red scout, attack 3 minus defense 0, he must roll a 3 or less. That's easier. But let's suppose he's a bit greedy and he decides to shoot the cruiser. He rolls a 1, wonderful, it's a hit. And there's no need to do the math because a roll of 1 always hits. There's always at least a 1 in 10 chance of getting a hit, whatever the ship's value and whatever modifiers apply. But here's another problem. A cruiser is a size 2 ship. That's what the times 2 on its counter means. So, the 1 point of damage just inflicted by the yellow scout is not enough to destroy it. We just put a damage counter on it to show that it has suffered 1 damage. Finally, the two red scouts shoot at the yellow scout. They must roll a 3. Boom, that's it, red player wins, end of the fight. Then, surviving units lose their damages. The red cruiser is repaired and will not bear the scars of this confrontation. And that's something to bear in mind. Yellow player with 1 damage could have eliminated the scout. By targeting the cruiser, he was too greedy. And before we go any further, you remember what we called groups. A cruiser unit with a 3 counter underneath means that it's actually a group of 3 cruisers. You can imagine a stack of 3 ships. Well, if this group is fired on and takes 1 point of damage, we put the damage marker on top, and that means that only 1 cruiser has suffered that point of damage, and that's the cruiser at the top of the stack. And as a cruiser can take 2 damages, if the group suffers 1 more damage, the top ship is eliminated and the group is now made up of 2 intact ships. Here is another example. This time a red cruiser attacks 2 yellow scouts. We've already solved almost the same battle, but what's interesting here is that yellow player has twice as many ships as red player. And in this case, yellow player's ships will get a +1 attack bonus. Just because their fleet is twice as big, They can use more efficient circling tactics, for example. Note that this has nothing to do with the actual strength of these ships. Yellow scouts are weaker than the red cruiser, but there are twice as many of them. And when it's time to shoot, with the +1 bonus, it will be as if their forces are worth 4-0 instead of 3-0. The bonus is added to their attack value and not their defense. But beware, the order in which you do these things is very important. Fleet size is determined at the beginning of the combat round, before resolution. So, in our example, the yellow fleet gets a +1 attack bonus, but the combat begins with the letter C, and it's red cruiser that shoots first. Attack 4 versus defense 0, it's a hit that eliminates 1 scout. And when it's yellow player's turn to shoot back, he still benefits from the fleet size bonus and attacks with a strength of 4, even though he's now fighting 1 versus 1. He needs to roll a 3 or less to inflict 1 damage on the cruiser. And if we go on with this example, the battle continues with the second round. And it's only then that we check again the size of the fleets and realize that yellow player has lost his advantage. You'll note that being damaged in no way diminishes the cruiser's values. And you'll also note that it remains damaged throughout round 2 and that only at the very end of the battle will it be automatically repaired since it survived until then. Fine, now let's go on with other fighting techniques with a new example. In this case, an armada of 6 red scouts, backed up by a single cruiser, comes up against a small force, but not ridiculous, of 4 yellow scouts. And perhaps can you see the problem? Red player is almost sure to win this battle, barring a major stroke of bad luck. At letter C, his cruiser has a good chance of eliminating 1 yellow ship. But then, at letter E, yellow scouts will shoot, and if they focus their fire on the cruiser with a little success, they can eliminate it, just because the shooter can always choose his target. And red player, sadly, can do little to prevent his best unit from being targeted. Well, there's something he can do, and that is screening. Screening takes place at the beginning of each round of combat, and it's a technique whereby a player uses some of his units to screen and protect other units. In a battle, only one side can use screening, and it's the player with the most units. Note that we count the number of units, not their strength. In our example, red player has 7 units and yellow player 4, so only red player can take advantage of screening. And that means that he can secure a number of units equal to the difference between the number of his units and the number of his opponents. 7 minus 4 equals 3. Red player can secure 3 units. Let's suppose he decides to screen just 1 unit, his cruiser. The cruiser hides behind the scouts. And the result is that this cruiser cannot be fired upon. It cannot be targeted by enemy fire. And it works both ways. The cruiser itself cannot fire either. It has, so to speak, moved away from the battle. Note that in our example, red player could add 2 scouts in screening, but he doesn't have to. And the logic here is that all his scouts protect the cruiser, which doesn't want to be sniped in a battle that's not worth the price. Of course, during the next step, when we count units to see if either player benefits from a fleet size bonus, we don't count units that have hidden in screening because they are not fighting. Here, at 6 versus 4, neither side gets a 2 versus 1 advantage, and no one will benefit from the +1 attack bonus. And that's it. Now let's see the battle resolution. Yellow player goes first because all ships have the same letter E, and in this case priority goes to the defender. Let's just say that yellow player is very lucky, and let's suppose that on the opposite, red player has no luck at all. As the fight isn't over, we move on to the next round and players checks again who can use screening. And this time it's yellow player who can screen units because he's the one who had the most units. Let's suppose he declines and keeps all his ships. Anyway, the fight goes on as usual, no need to continue this example any further. What's important to remember above all is that screening and fleet size bonuses are checked again at the beginning of every round of combat, and the balance of power can change within a battle. And don't forget that in both cases we are counting the number of units, not their strength. So, when you are thinking about the composition of your war fleets, don't forget that small ships in large numbers can give you some real tactical advantage. Okay, now we know how warships fight, those built for combat. You can recognize them by the combat values written on their counters. We know all these values, the class which gives the order in which units fire, attack and defense strength, and the amount of damage a unit can sustain before being destroyed. But we know that some units don't have these values. These are non-combat units. We already know two of them, miners and colony ships. Simple. Since they cannot fight, they always go in screening away from battle. Non-combat units on both sides are automatically positioned in screening behind the screen of their fellow fighting comrades. Here is a quick example. A small red force attacks a yellow force. Screening. First, you automatically start by setting aside all non-combat units on both sides. These units won't fight at all. Then comes the standard screening rules. As red player has one more unit, he can take it out of combat and protect it with screening. Suppose he wants to protect his cruiser this way. Resolution with the same class letter E, yellow player is the defender, so he shoots first. And quite luckily, he eliminates the two red scouts. And here is a bizarre situation where all ships not protected by screenings have been eliminated. But no matter, there are still fighting ships, so we go on with the fight. Next round. Screening non-combat units are always in the protected zone, no choice. But for the other units, it's now yellow player who has the most ships and could screen them. But he doesn't choose to do so, especially to get the +1 fleet size attack bonus, because what counts is the comparison of ships actually fighting, not screening. Resolution, bad luck, red player misses, and yellow player succeeds with both his shots. The red cruiser is eliminated. And then, as one side, the red side, has no fighting units left, the battle is over. And when a non-combat unit ends up alone in the presence of an enemy combat unit, which is the case for the red colony ship, well, that non-combat unit is eliminated. And note that this is the only way to destroy a non-combat unit. As a non-combat unit is always protected by screening, it can never be directly targeted. The only way to kill it is to destroy before all the fighting units protecting it. And of course, if a fighting unit enters the hexagon with a non-combat unit alone, it's eliminated without a fight, because it's not even protected. Finally, I'd like to remind you that non-combat unit counter always represents a single ship. For example, each player has 4 miner counters, not one more. This means he can build a maximum of 4 miner ships, not one more. A miner ship counter cannot represent a group of more than 1 miner ship. Well, now there's still one last topic I'd like to address before concluding this third video. Last example. A fleet of 4 red cruisers meets 4 poor yellow scouts who don't stand a chance. They look stuck and doomed to fight as they can, with the only hope of perhaps destroying one cruiser, but actually they have another option. They can try to run away. In the first round of combat, there is no way to retreat. No escape is ever possible on the first round of a battle. Both sides must necessarily fight at least one round, with the standard rules we've just seen. Let's assume that nothing happens during this first round, and now, if yellow player wants to save his troops, the rule is simple. A ship can retreat and leave its hexagon instead of firing. So, right at the moment when it could fire, it can retreat instead. Let's look on our example. Letter C, red player shoots first. He eliminates one yellow scout. Then it's yellow ship's turn to shoot. But instead of firing, the ships can run away to an adjacent hexagon, a hexagon that contains no enemy units, and by doing so, retreating ships cannot move away from their own colonies. It's common sense, retreating means flying toward home. Nor may a unit withdraw to an unexplored hexagon. So here, the yellow scouts move back one hexagon. And from then on, as they are no longer enemies, the fight is over. And that's it. You must always fight at least one full round, but after that you can choose to give up and fly away. Screen units can retreat depending on their class, so when their priority letter is reached. So if you have more ships than your opponents, you can sacrifice some weak units to screen and protect the retreat of your most valuable units. On the other hand, non-combat units can never retreat. Remember that these non-combat ships are too slow to escape a battle, and so the only way to protect them is to fight. And voila, you know all there is to know in order to fight and exterminate your enemy's war fleet. In the next video, we'll look at the last X we are missing, expansion. That means the development of techno trees that allow players to upgrade their fleets and compete in a wonderful arms race.